Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Starlight Glimmer here once again, and I am back for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Mario vs Donkey Kong Remake for the Nintendo Switch. So, last time, we've essentially going to be able to be participating in Time Attack mode, and as a result, currently we've only done 6 worlds so far, ranging from Mario Toy Company, Donkey Kong Jungle, Fire Mountain, Merry Mini Land, as well as Spooky House, and also Slippery Summit. So, yeah, that's as far as I can try to say about that. So today for this video is about the fact that we're going to be continue playing through Time Attack mode, except this time we are now going to be jump right into World 7, which appears to be Mystic Forest, and maybe at some point all the way up to, let's just say, World 5 Plus, which appears to be Spooky House Plus. So the reason why I'm pointing things out is because, exponentially speaking though, is about the fact that I would say that we're almost able to finish up this entire game during at some point in during the forms of in tomorrow's Easter Sunday, because no matter what though, is about the fact that we've pretty much almost done with this game. So no matter what though, I'm pretty sure no matter what though, is about the fact that, well, despite the fact that this is still post-commentary after all, just because, again, I'm only going to be showing off the successful runs of the forms of specifically with all these Time Attack runs, so exponentially speaking, there's nothing right to harm about, aside from the fact that for its participations. So yeah, you get the idea for this point. So, anyway, a few things I want to explain for this point today. That's what appears to be about the fact that, well, today's date of course is the 30th of March in 2024. So naturally speaking, as I mentioned this before, that tomorrow's going to be Easter Sunday. So as a result, I get the strong feeling that Pinkie Pie, she's obviously going to be able to be fetching some more chocolate eggs, including with the forms of mini eggs as well, just I'm sure for the sake of the forms of trying to able to celebrate Easter as much as we can do. And on top of all that stuff though, maybe exponentially speaking though, then maybe it's a possibility we might able to get some bit of cash every once in a while. Just in case, no matter what though, I can pretty much guarantee to able to get, well, not only some more of those Nintendo eShop cards, so exponentially I can able to get my possibilities able to obtain the remaining Donkey Kong Arcade Archive games, which is, of course, Donkey Kong Jr. and Donkey Kong 3. There's only one in particular exception to this, however, though, and that's, of course, Donkey Kong Jr. Math. But let's face it, though, because that game honestly blows, because obviously, no matter what, though, it requires a lot of thinking, and on top of that, it's just incredibly boring with Donkey Kong Jr. Math, because as far as I'm aware, whoever thought that was a good idea to able to release that game to begin with, well, to be more specifically on the Nintendo Entertainment System, but that's besides the point. So, anyway though, so as you probably doubt from the very start actually, is about the fact that we actually got ourselves some tons of news I'd like to discuss. Although despite the fact that Maxi has originally tried to able to explain some parts of it though, like for instance, is about the fact that it's pretty incredible to see, the Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door intro sequence looks a lot more details this time around though, especially noticeable because during the forms of the opening the book segment, and then when you're trying to see the actual pages themselves, it's now fully animated, which as a result, it is pretty cool to see the actual some segments of the intro sequence in Journey Forms of the Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door remake is now fully animated. So because of that though, speaking of which though, is about the fact that, well, not long now until specifically, not only about the fact I believe we've only just got about, I would say, 54 days to go until Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door remake on the Switch is going to be releasing. But also something's worth noting for is that I believe we've only got about 5 more days to go until Freedom Planet 2 is going to be releasing on multiple platforms, including Nintendo Switch and you name the rest. So obviously I'm going to be aiming for the Nintendo Switch version so I can able to experience Freedom Planet 2 on the go. So thankfully I don't have to rely on trying to able to actually purchase the most expensive device, which appears to be by the forms of maybe PlayStation Portal, and especially noticeable with Steam Deck, which as a result, I was planning to able to try to get Steam Deck, but I've heard some of these questionable things about it. Although, don't get me wrong, it is an interesting handheld, but it's just that I'm not exactly a PC gamer or anything. Well, I'm used to anyway, but I'm not exactly a huge PC gamer or anything else like that. I usually just referring to get certain games on console releases, including handhelds as well, just to able to check those out exponentially. So yeah, you get the idea for this point. And another thing is worth noting for exponentially speaking though, is that recently we've actually got ourselves a new confirmation for the sake of the forms of not only certain release dates during that specific period, but also ever since yesterday, and that also applies for about 2 days ago roughly, that as it turns out we actually got ourselves some more information thanks to the forms of, well, let's just say we've actually got ourselves the one last Game Boy Advance game has now been added onto the forms of the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack. And as it turns out, yes, F-Zero Maximum Velocity has recently came out for the likes of the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack recently. So with that being said, I believe that pretty much takes care of the majority of the forms of the Game Boy Advance games up to this point in regards to the forms of the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack. So no matter what though, I really do wish that they were able to actually add in more titles to the mix, which as a result we still have no idea when these other games is going to be approaching for the sake of the forms of the Game Boy Advance selections of games. Like for instance, where's the forms of Metroid Zero Mission, including with the forms of Kirby Nightmare and Dreamland, because I already know for the fact that those two games are considerably remakes from the likes of the forms of the based off from the original counterparts from the likes of both Metroid and Kirby's Adventure, respectively. So, relatively speaking, that's as far as I can try to think about it. And heck, let's not forget ourselves with the forms of, well, I don't think it's possible, I don't think that we might able to include Mario Party Advance, just because that game does have lacking in multiplayer. Well, technically there was multiplayer involved, mainly during the forms of in Playland, but that's as far as I can try to think about it. Alongside with the forms of the other mode I could probably think about. Well, I mean, let's face it though, it's been ages since I actually have last played Mario Party Advance. But that's just mainly because at this point in time, I'm pretty much more accustomed to able to be playing through other Mario Party games, including with the forms of some of these recent ones, which is the forms of Mario Party Superstars, for the sake of the forms of online experience and all that stuff, which, again, that's besides the point. So, now, for the most part though, in regards to the forms of the time attack runs, and during the forms of being the later worlds to come, about the fact I feel like that Mystic Forest is pretty tricky for the most part, mainly with the forms of you have to require a lot of speed going. And on top of all that stuff though, sometimes, I will admit though right away, I tend to mess up quite a lot of times in journey forms of being level 7-3, specifically in the beginning portion anyway, just because no matter what though, you need to be super duper fast at it. And on top of all that stuff though, is about the fact that if you mess up one wrong move, obviously chances are though, you're probably not gonna able to succeed on that part. So chances are though, it does take us a bit of a lot of practice when it comes to able to try to tackle for those specific stages at once. So, well, to be more accurate though, if you're trying to able to cooperate, just trying to deal with those conveyor belts, you know? So, there's also another thing I want to point out as well, is that recently we've actually able to went to see, you know what I'm saying, with the forms of the brand new trailer for the likes of the forms of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, and let me tell you, I'm still pretty excited for that game. I believe the trailer was actually called, it appears to be by the forms of Power versus Speed, which obviously shows us the forms of some characters do have this different attributes between speed or power and all around and all that stuff though. I mean, granted, no matter what though, is about the fact that, well, I'm sure enough though is about the fact that we'll explain more details about the forms of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero at some point in the future, because as a result of that particular matter what though, much like the forms of how it does on the previous trailers, obviously it still says wish list now, so as a result, we still have no idea when does the actual proper release date. Is it going to announce at some point? Maybe at some point during the forms of sometime in 2025 or something like that, because I already know for the fact that it's only going to be releasing on, well, PlayStation 5, including Xbox Series X/S, and even PC Steam as well, and maybe with a possibility of a new Nintendo console in the future, which, if that seems to be the case, I'm gonna be pretty excited and pretty much hyped about it, if that's gonna be coming onto the next Nintendo system, which, hopefully that'll make it happen. If depends, really. So, there's also another thing I want to point out as well, is that out of nowhere, in the actual context, if the films of the new season is going to be approaching onto on its way, as it turns out, unfortunately though, Velma just somehow managed able to get itself a second season, which as a result, no matter what though, is about the fact that Velma Season 2 is going to be releasing on Max until April 25th, which, ironically enough, is going to be releasing around the exact same week as the films of Knuckles the series on Paramount Plus, which as a result, yeah, it's a bit of a weird situation when it comes to releasing both of those things throughout the exact same weekend, or week, to be more specifically. So, I still classify for saying that I think it's a possibility that, yeah, I'm definitely going to be excited for Knuckles the series a lot more, just because we want to know about the films of how the fact that what the actual future of Sonic movie franchise has to come. To be more specifically though, is about the fact that we can able to expect to know if Sonic the Hedgehog 3 the movie will able to actually get ourselves a bit of understanding situations or somewhat. So, although I can't really tell exactly for sure just yet though, but I do know for one thing in mind is that we've only got about 1 month left, exactly, until Knuckles the series is going to be releasing on Paramount Plus. So, yeah, as a result, I'm still very excited for that particular stuff though, and I'm sure enough though, I'm obviously going to be ignoring Velma Season 2, just because obviously I have no idea why does that season has to be announced for the sake of Season 2 either way. I mean, let's face it though, it's just about the fact that a lot of fans and critics alike don't really care too much of the films of Velma anymore, just because it's all wrong in almost every single way imaginable. So, and also another thing I want to classify for mentioning about this as well, is that do you guys even remember the character called Toadsworth? Well, apparently though, it's about the fact that we are glad to report that Toadsworth, as the actual character, did somehow make its return. Ever since, in technically speaking, from the likes of Super Mario 3D All-Stars being a part of the Super Mario Sunshine game, even though despite the fact that it was usually emulated, but I'm referring to as, technically speaking though, a remake of Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story, plus Bowser Jr.'s Journey, because obviously Toadsworth was in that game as the NPC, and as a result, it is so cool to see Toadsworth in paper form, in Journey forms within Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door remake as well. So, relatively speaking though, I'm pretty sure that every original characters have been completely left intact, just like the forms of how it does it in the original GameCube release. So, I fully appreciate about that. Especially noticeable, it's a shame about the fact that the actual frame rate is going to drop into 30 frames per second. I'm sure it might actually take a bit while to get used to once that particular remake decides to release. So no matter what though, is about the fact that all we need left now is, of course, we need to get ourselves the overview trailer just to know about the forms of how certain new additions will be added, or maybe it's a possibility that we might get ourselves the final Nintendo Direct based off from Nintendo Switch 1 before they moved on to the next system or something. Well, it's a bit difficult to tell at this point either, plus it's because yet again more rumors and leaks keeps popping out, which as a result I still don't trust these rumors and leaks anymore, just because, well, you probably already know what I'm talking about, and I know for a fact I do apologize for the fact that, well, again, it's just kind of a nuisance to know about the forms of how the fact that if it's true or not. Well, let's face it though, I'm essentially done with the forms of rumors and leaks anymore, because sometimes though, you know what I'm talking about, which hopefully by that time, if the next Nintendo system is going to be releasing at some point, obviously I don't have to worry about the forms of rely on the forms of, you know, rumors and leaks and stuff like that. I mean, sure, some of them can become true for some scenarios, specifically for the likes of the Happy Mario 10 Day, which I can't even believe it's been about 20 days ago since we did somehow manage to celebrate Happy Mario 10 Day since Journey forms within March the 10th. So, and kind of thinking about it though, is about the fact that speaking of something related to, let's just say something like Mario or anything else like that, to be more specifically, well, as it turns out, no matter what though, is about the fact that recently, I did somehow manage able to also found out is that recently, F-Zero 99 has recently revealed a new update. To be more specifically, it's now on version 1.3.0. And what the specific features though added in? Well, I'll tell you exactly for sure. It does manage to able to include a Mirror Grand Prix, which is a similar thing as the forms of, able to actually access to Mirror Mode for the sake of any other Mario Kart games, since in, technically in Mario Kart 64, because in Mario Kart 64 firstly introduced Mirror difficulty, or should I say Extra Mode, although later on in Mario Kart Double Dash renamed it as Mirror Mode, just because, everything else is completely flipped after all. So, anyway, yeah, like I mentioned this before, it'll able to actually have Mirror Grand Prix alongside with Mirror Tracks for Night League and classic mini prix. I'm not exactly sure how that seems to be the case, and yeah, that's as far as I can try to say about this, I guess. Although, there's actually that other unique thing I could possibly try to able to think about what there's specifically new updates they're able to actually add it in. Like, for instance, do you guys even remember playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe? Well, basically, there's this particular newcomer device called, or specifically a casual gamer thing called Smart Steering. Well, as it turns out, Smarting Steering is actually going to be returning in the forms of F-Zero 99. Now, I'm pretty sure it behaves exactly like the forms of how it does it in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Like, basically, that is about the fact that it just decides to help you guide your machine around turns and barriers, and even pushing your piloting skills even with higher in an expanded practice mode or something. So, and there's also the times challenges, which as a result it's for limited time in-game rewards. And on top of all that stuff though, there's also some new level obstacles ranging from bumpers as well as the forms of bouncy bumpers or something like that. Neither especially noticeable with this very random object. I'm not exactly sure how do I explain about this personally though. I mean, relatively speaking though, it is pretty cool to able to have some new features in Journey forms of in F-Zero 99 after all, despite the fact that I still haven't exactly experienced the game for myself. Plus, just because I will admit though right away, I'm not a big fan of the forms of some of these specific Nintendo Switch games to rely on the forms of the Battle Royale kind of matches and stuff like that, because I will admit though right away, although the only game exception to this I do honestly enjoy back then, which appears to be Super Mario Bros. 35, which as a result, despite the fact that it's a shame that we can't play that game anymore, just because of this stupid limited time playability and stuff like that, which honestly though, yeah, it seems pretty sad still, since back in Journey forms have been a lockdown of all things, or to be more specifically than that, since in Journey forms have been 2021, just around before when April Fool's Day decides to able to approach it on itself. So, anyway, something's worth noting for as well is about the fact that recently as well, about the fact that yes, indeed, is about the fact that recently DreamWorks has been addressed that the sequel to The Bad Guys is going to be confirmed. So, yeah, as a result, it's going to be The Bad Guys 2. And yes, that particular film is going to be confirmed, and it's going to be releasing until 2025, which is roughly the exact same year as in not only Fast 11, but also with maybe the new Mission Impossible film, and even especially noticeable with the films of some other films as well, ranging from Minecraft, and even especially noticeable some atrocious ones for sure, ranging from the live-action adaptations with not only Snow White, but also with the forms of Moana as well, despite the fact that Moana wasn't even 10 years old at this point, especially whenever we get to 2026, it will definitely able to actually deserves a celebration for, you know what I'm saying, the 10th anniversary of Moana, alongside with the forms of Zootopia or Zootropolis for those who lived in the UK. So, yeah, chances are though, I just seriously still think that was a missed opportunity when it comes to able to releasing the live-action version of Moana during at some point in 2025, because, again, the original film wasn't even 10 years old at that point. So, also, something's worth noting for is about the fact that since, as you can tell, that we've already did somehow completely done everything for the sake of the forms of Mystic Forest right now. So as a result, we now ended up in Twilight City, and as you can tell, thankfully, there's no spikes on that particular ending portion of that particular second segment in level 8-5, because imagine if spikes were able to appear on that specific point. Obviously though, it'll make things a little bit more of a trial and error experience, especially noticeable about the fact that, well, again, if you do die at one point, then you have to start all over again, depending on what level you go into, so... But I digress. So I think it did say the actual specific release date, for the sake of the Forms of the Bad Guys 2. Oh yeah, speaking of which though, it's about the fact that I'm pretty sure that particular film is also going to be releasing around the same year as when Zootopia 2 is going to be releasing on that as well. So it looks like that 2025 is going to be able to have themselves this higher expectations when it comes to filming releases and maybe some new games every once in a while. So... well, we can't expect able to get hyped about 2025 just yet though, especially noticeable because we're still on 2024 after all, so... but that's besides the point. So, anyways though, another thing I want to address something about this as well, is that recently, during the Forms of Bin a couple of days ago, yes, I did manage to able to watch a short film which appears to be by the Forms of the Spider-Within, the Spider-Verse story, and I will say, the graphics still looks pretty amazing, especially noticeable, it's like the exact same art style as the Forms of how it does it on not only Into the Spider-Verse, but also with the Forms of Across the Spider-Verse. So, chances are though, yeah, I do enjoy it for what it is, although we only need to be hoping for right now is of course, when does Beyond the Spider-Verse is going to be releasing after the events of that particular aftermath of that particular writer's strike has now ended. So, well, it's a bit difficult to tell at this point either. Well, that's just mainly because no matter what though, sometimes making films can take a very long time to make, which is understandably so. Especially noticeable, we need to get the actual things itself right, whilst unlike in some other films, somehow didn't go well, ranging from food fights alongside with the Forms of some other films as well, like Thomas and the Magic Railroad, for I've heard anyway, because obviously it keeps on deleting some of these original contents that was originally attempted. I'm guessing it's probably because of the actual younger demographic, so that seems to be the case. Like, for instance, they removed one of those villains, which appears to be P.T. Boomer, as well as the Forms of some very frightening moments, which as a result, again, it's probably because of the Forms of something relates to the Forms of the guidance and stuff like that, where it comes to the Forms of the actual targeting audiences, more likely for kids and stuff like that, which, yeah, it's kind of what you expect when it comes to likely knowing about the Forms of some original content is being cut, and, you know, it decides they're able to actually go, you know what I'm talking about. So, and as you can see, this is the final time we can able to actually guide those mini Marios into the actual toy box right there, because chances are though is that we've now made our way to the final normal world in Journey Forms of the Time Attack aspect, and because of that we're now going to be going on to well, the Donkey Kong boss fight yet again for the sake of Twilight City. So, and exponentially speaking, I was about the fact that sometimes it does take a bit of a quiet while since you can able to actually expect to know of what to do right here for those conveyor belts you have to wait for. So, either way though, for the most part, it's about the fact that the time attack aspects in the Donkey Kong boss fights is actually not too shabby, except with the Forms of maybe, slippery summons sometimes, but that's just mainly because that's the reason why that we ended up trying to able to aim for 100 seconds or less, just to ensure no matter what though it doesn't tend to drag. So, but at this point in time folks, it's about the fact that once we've done everything in Twilight City, we can now move on to the Plus Worlds. So because of this though, I can't even believe the actual emphasis on that is actually getting ridiculously fast, all things considered. Well, mind you, as you can tell, I somehow managed to able to screw up at one point right there, but I still managed to make it in the nick of time, especially noticeable because I pretty much know exactly what to do, especially noticeable sometimes if I activate the switch to able to change the specific directions of the conveyor belts, then obviously I have to pay attention onto the right side of the screen, so I can definitely tell that the bob-omb to somehow instantly go to Donkey Kong, and that's basically all there is to it for the majority of the main worlds. So now let's move on to the Plus Worlds, starting with, of course, Mario Toy Factory. So because of this though, thankfully we don't need to rely on the Forms of two different sections anymore, so it's just about no matter what though, we can now able to rely on only one particular section, which as a result ranging from plus worlds in general, including the expert stages as well. So generally speaking, I was about the fact that some of them are actually pretty tricky for time attack runs, although because then again, you need to be so accurate with all that particular movements and what have you, which there is that one particular stage coming up that it does manage to give me a couple of tries on my first run through of the game by myself, even with my practice run, I should say. Obviously, no matter what though, it does manage to took me about a couple of tries back then. So anyways though, there's also another thing I want to mention about this as well, and good news everybody, is that Spyro 4 is actually now in development. So because of that though, I highly doubt, I don't know if this is going to be coming onto the Nintendo Switch for sure, just because I'm pretty sure they'll try to save up Spyro 4 until the next Nintendo system, including PlayStation 5, including with the forms of Xbox Series X as well, even with Series S if you decide able to go for a digital only system. But then again, that particular topic can wait during at some point in the next few years time. So it depends on the forms of how long those games can take for its making department or developing kind of stuff. So yeah, that's as far as I can try to think about it. And so we're pretty excited to know about the fact that yes, Spyro 4 is now in development. So I'm very excited to see what that's gonna turn out. So anyway, speaking of something in development kind of stuff, as it turns out as well, that recently is that the next Pirates of the Caribbean movie is going to be officially confirmed to be a reboot, which I'm not exactly sure how I feel about it, just because no matter what though, I'm still basically more accustomed to the fact that with Johnny Depp as the forms of Captain Jack Sparrow is the most iconic character of all time in regards to the forms of the Pirates of the Caribbean movie series. As a matter of fact, like I can still able to rewatch the forms of the first installment over and over again, so I can able to actually enjoy myself with it. So yeah, that's all I can really think about it as well. And there's also another thing I want to point out as well, is that I think potentially speaking of is about the fact that, well, speaking of something related to Dragon Ball, there is technically a theme park is actually going to be built somewhere in Arabia, which as a result, no matter what though, is about the fact that they're able to actually bring all kinds of landmarks based off from Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super, etc, etc. And for what I've seen the actual images, including the actual video itself, for the likes of that particular Dragon Ball theme park, that basically though, as I said before, it's going to take place in Arabia. And yeah, it does look pretty cool and awesome at the same time, because no matter what though, I've seen some images ranging from the construction of the forms of the roller coaster, which involves around Shinron, alongside with the forms of the Dragon Ball surround it. So that's actually pretty cool, and I would have liked able to actually go there, but of course, I still need to rely on going on to the Super Nintendo world first, during the forms of in America though, just because I'm still, you know what I'm saying, excited for going into the Super Nintendo world for the first time in person. So yeah, that's what I can really think about it. So yeah, in terms of the forms of another thing I want to mention about is that since that I've already mentioned about this earlier, that now that F-Zero Maximum Velocity has now been finally appeared in Journey forms have been, you know, Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack. So that begs the question about the fact that since we're still on March after all, so this means we actually had a grand total of not 1, but 4 classic games that somehow appears in joining forms of the Nintendo Switch Online services when it comes to likely for its, you know, not only for Game Boy, but for Game Boy Advance game selections as well. Like for instance, that in Journey forms have been a halfway point in March, almost anyway, that we somehow received not 1, but 3 different Mario games for the Game Boy lineup, which there are obviously Dr. Mario, as well as Mario Golf and Mario Tennis, which despite the fact that there was a lack of N64 transfer pack system, similar to the forms of how it does it for both Pokemon Stadium 1 as well as Pokemon Stadium 2. So, and also we somehow received F-Zero Maximum Velocity, making a grand total of 4 different games to able to actually get itself released joining forms of the Nintendo Switch Online services and stuff like that, which is pretty insane if you ask me. Although I was expecting for the fact that we can probably get even more. Well, then again, we'll have to wait and see what happens, and during at some point in during the informs about April, that we might able to actually get ourselves our next batch of selection of specific games for, let's just say, for the Nintendo 64, and even with Game Boy Advance, or with Game Boy, or even maybe for Sega Game Gear, if that's possible. Well, mind you, we've already got the majority of the Sonic games on the Game Gear for the Nintendo Switch, thanks to the forms of Sonic Origins Plus, as you probably already know, especially notable because despite the fact you have to pay extra amount of pounds or dollars to be more specifically, depending on what region you lived in. So that's a bit of a bummer though, unless if you do able to actually have the physical copy of the forms of Sonic Origins Plus with the download code and everything, then it should be okay for the most part. So anyway, that pretty much takes care of the rest of the forms of Mario Toy Company right now, or specifically Mario Toy Factory I should say. So now let's move on to Donkey Kong Jungle Plus. Now, as far as the Plus worlds are concerned, when it comes to my experiencing on Time Attack runs, as I mentioned this before, there is one particular level, it does give me a lot of hard times sometimes, in journey forms of in, let's just say in one of the later worlds in the Plus Worlds department, that you see why as soon as we get to tomorrow anyway, because, you know, like I mentioned this before, it's about the fact that we are now on to the 30th of March already, so as a result, we've only got 2 more days to go until April is now rolling around. So because of that, and that could be also applies for the April Fool's Day as well. So yeah, it's actually gone a lot more interesting for the sake of the forms of how the day is actually going to be represented for. So either way, let's move on to the next level right here, and oh jeez, it gives us a shorter amount of time, which as a result, we need to act fast, because otherwise, if we are too late, then obviously we have to do this all over again, if depending on the forms of how skillful we are. So, but I digress. So also, another thing I want to mention about this as well is that someone out there did somehow commenting on this, is that for whatever reason that he did heard about, that Disney is axing one of the attractions in Tokyo Disneyland, and what that particular land is going to be able to be axed for, well, it's a small world, and it's going to turn into a Marvel theme ride featuring Groot. So yeah, I honestly have no idea why they somehow managed able to address that. Although mind you, he did say about the fact that in notes, in brackets, it's temporarily. So not exactly sure how that seems to be the case, but either way, I honestly have no words to say. And of course, we can never forget to mention about the fact that, yes indeed, it's officially became 15 years old since when Monsters vs. Aliens did somehow first came out on a big screen. And as far as I'm aware, this is technically, well, for Monsters vs. Aliens, that film is often considered to be the final DreamWorks movie of the 2000s era. Like, usually, relatively speaking, that was the only film as well to only came out in 2009, whilst compared to in 2010, managed able to contain not 1, but 2 DreamWorks movies during that time, which is Shrek Forever After, and even with Megamind. So, yeah, that's as far as I can probably think about it. So, even though despite the fact that a lot of people seem to able to notice about the fact that a lot of people really do not like the sequel to Megamind, because obviously no matter what though, I still haven't seen it just yet though, but from what I've heard anyway, it's gonna be a pretty miserable experience for the second Megamind movie, because honestly though, the original is definitely a lot more better in terms of not only for its scale, but it's also about the fact that with all its memes and pretty much everything else you pretty much already expect. So anyway, and I suppose technically there's also the final thing I want to mention about before we discuss upon the forms of some other miscellaneous kind of stuff. As it turns out, it's about the fact that recently that The Last of Us Season 2 is actually wrapped up filming. So as a result, yeah, we have no idea when does that season is going to be eventually going to be releasing. So that again, we'll have to wait and see what happens. And also, it's about the fact that one of those producers did somehow began producing the Marvel Studios Fantastic Four in June at some point in the summer. It could be either be sometime in June or July, or August, depending on the informs of the timing aspect. So, yeah, that's as far as saying goes, that's as far as we can able to discuss upon the forms of something new and all that stuff. Well, apart from the fact that a lot of people seemed able to address upon too much information to able to discuss upon Sonic Heroes Remake, which as a result, I'm a little bit optimistic about this though, especially noticeable because despite the fact that, well, a lot of people seemed able to get a massive criticism about the fact that why can Sega decide to able to remake not only Sonic Adventure, but also Sonic Adventure 2 as well. I mean, that could be a lot more sense, but apparently though, they decided able to go for this particular rumor route by simply able to mention Sonic Heroes Remake, which, truth be told though, is going to be on next generation of systems if that became true, which as a result is official to me though, is that I feel like that Sonic Cross Shadow Generations is often considered to be the final Sonic game to be released on maybe on PlayStation 4, but also with Xbox One and maybe with Nintendo Switch as well, before they strictly move on to next generation of systems, I'm pretty sure. Well, that again is a bit difficult to tell at this point as well, so generally speaking, we'll have to wait and see what happens later down the road, but either way, there goes Donkey Kong right here for the likes of Donkey Kong Jungle Plus, and that's pretty much about it for, well, Donkey Kong Jungle Plus. So now let's move on to Fire Mountain Plus, and this is where the fact that the rest of the time attack mode in the Plus Worlds department is actually going to get a lot more harder, which as a result, yeah, that again though, I'm only going to be showing you some of the successful attempts for that department, so either way. Oh, and also another thing I want to mention about this as well, I felt a little bit annoyed about the fact that with the most recent uploads that I somehow managed to address something, is that out of nowhere, is that we keep on losing specific amount of views for specific videos that I somehow put up with. I'm thinking it's most likely because of this stupid glitch, or perhaps even maybe it's because of something else for that matter. Well, mind you, no matter what though, is about the fact that I sort of able to actually forgot to mention about that, since technically back in the beginning portion of March or something like that, well, I guess that might be seems to be the case, but still. But I digress. So, also I just want to classify for mentioning about this as well, is that originally though, I was expecting to able to realize that, actually, no matter what though, it's kind of difficult to tell at this point right about now, in regards to the forms of trying to mention about other things worth noting for. Well, truth be told though, because I already know for the fact that it's been about, let's just say 6 days ago since we've last played this game for sure, and by that time, once we finish up everything in Mario vs. Donkey Kong for sure, then we can basically move on to the next Nintendo Switch game, if possible, which as a result, yeah, I'm sure you probably already know what exactly I'm about to say. So, anywho though, there's also another thing I want to mention is that yes, no matter what though, is that I'm pretty concerned about the fact that maybe it's a possibility that by that time until next week, that maybe Coco Bandicoot might able to actually decide able to finish up everything for the likes of not only Klonoa 2, Lunity's Veil on the remastered version, but also with the entire Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series enduring at some point and during the forms of it next week coming up. So as a result, once she did manage able to finish that game up, obviously we'll move on to some different games elsewhere, which as a result, again, we can't exactly tell you for more details up to this point, just because no matter what though, we'll save that particular super top secret as far as I'm usually concerned with. Again, I apologize for my commentary, it's a little bit slightly, not necessarily bare bones this time around though, but more so about the fact that there's not much else I can really speak about, in terms of the forms of what is going on recently, especially noticeable because no matter what though, I'm still a little bit more optimistic about the forms of how the fact that, well, at this point in time, is about the fact that, in regards to the forms of everything else I can probably describe about, that, relatively speaking though, in regards to the forms of the final Super Monkey Ball game, I would say, for the sake of time, that the final Super Monkey Ball game for the Nintendo Switch is officially going to be confirmed, as in Banana Rumble is going to be the final Nintendo Switch Super Monkey Ball game, I'm pretty sure, if I'm guessing so anyway, because mind you, unlike the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, that so far they've only got 2 of those games, which both are entirely remastered, I'm pretty sure, from both of those games in particular, for the likes of not only Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz, but also with Super Monkey Ball Deluxe, technically, just because no matter what though, you probably get the idea of what I'm talking about. So, anyway though, and speaking of something Super Monkey Ball related though, it's been quite some time since actually we've last did our Let's Play of something related to Super Monkey Ball since Super Monkey Ball on the Nokia N-Gage. And by that time when Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble is going to be approaching its release on the Nintendo Switch, let me know in the comments down below of which specific games do you want me to tackle through just before Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble it will be releasing on the Nintendo Switch. And I'm sure enough though, we will definitely going to be tackled for that game once that game decides to able to release. So alongside with the forms of Luigi's Mansion 2 HD coming up as well, although then again we'll save Luigi's Mansion 2 for the likes of at some point in September, just before Halloween is almost going to be approaching until October, to make a little bit more sense for the sake of able to actually play a Luigi's Mansion game just before when October rolls around or something like that. So, but then again though, we have to wait and see what happens though, especially concerning for the fact that we are still focusing on 3 games so far still, like 3 games at a time, during the forms of the different daily basis and stuff like that. Also, I just realized about something I honestly forgot to mention about, is that, yes, indeed, it's about the fact that another one of those UK channels, which appears to be Tiny Pop, well, to be more accurate though, the broadcast version of Tiny Pop has ceased to exist. So because of that though, yeah, let's just say a farewell to the forms of Tiny Pop, that the actual channel who did manage to able to host only one of those particular shows that we obviously into at this point, which is of course My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, and of course that that particular program also did My Little Pony Pony Life, which as a result that particular series is pretty bad in my opinion, because obviously that particular mini-series is just all over the place, ranging from its visual presentation and also the continuity and of course the 11 minutes kind of structure or something. Well, mind you, it's been ages since I actually have last watched My Little Pony Pony Life, but that's just mainly because still to me Friendship is Magic is the more superior experience in my opinion, just because of all that, well, world building alongside with the forms of some villains and of course some interesting story details, and also you probably get the idea of how the fact that the reason why that we always attempt to prefer G4 over the likes of any other generations, yes, includes Generation 5 in my honest opinion, but that's just because in G5 there's a lack of world building, so but that's just me. Especially noticeable, it's bad enough that Make You Mark series has officially ended way earlier than I was expecting, which I was assuming they were able to bring in, well, more concepts into the table, but I mean, let's face it though, the actual series itself of Make You Mark is received very poorly, which as a result, ranging from its, well, rushed development, or perhaps even maybe because of character development, is actually going to be, well, a little bit too little for my taste. Well, it's hard to describe, because I already know for a fact it's been quite a few long ago since we've last watched something related to the forms of G5, aside from the fact that the next video game thing is going to be approaching on us, so enduring around that time until the next couple of weeks or so, but you know. Also, I just realized about the fact that we've only got about exactly 1 month left until Braid Anniversary Edition is going to be releasing. So, maybe I will try to give that game a chance, especially noticeable because I've heard some good things about it though. Especially noticeable because, thankfully, I don't have to worry about the forms of that ridiculous star requirements, which, for those of you who want to know about the fact that in order to be able to get one of those stars in particular, is that you need to run on the cloud platform, and you have to wait for about approximately 2 hours to able to actually get onto that particular well-hidden passageway, and then basically that allows us to able to get ourselves our next star. Whilst thankfully on the Switch version that's not that much of a problem, because obviously you can able to play the game on the go, luckily, so that's the reason why I'm attempting to able to try to go after purchasing Braid Anniversary Edition, alongside with maybe Super Meat Boy as well. I already know for a fact that Super Meat Boy is really difficult. Like, I'm telling you right now that you might die a lot in Super Meat Boy. Whilst luckily you do have infinite amount of lives though, from what I've heard anyway. Although there's also Cave Story as well. Although, relatively speaking, I've heard about the fact that the very last level in the game, called Blood Century, or Conquered the Secret Grounds, is actually brutally difficult because of the lack of checkpoints, and also you have to conquer not 1 but 5 boss encounters, which as a result, jeez, that is insane. But anyway, as you can tell, we've already did manage to complete it. Fire Mountain Plus, and now we're going on to Merry Miniland Plus. And fundamentally speaking now, this will be the final time we're going to be able to experiencing, well, not necessarily just yet though, until specifically the expert stages, like I said before. Now I'm sure enough that we will able to actually get onto the expert stages coming up as well. So there might be a couple of times though about the fact that, well, we'll attempt to occasionally try to show off some failed attempts every once in a while. And just to ensure for the fact that if the level itself isn't that very complicated to solve or anything else like that. So, but either way, also I just want to classify for something worth noting for as well, that I'm pretty concerned about the fact that we've only got about 5 more days to go as well until when Rio 2, as far as the film itself, for those of you who lived in the UK, is going to celebrate its 10th anniversary, which as a result, don't worry, we'll mention more about the films of while looking back on Rio 2, despite it does have some flaws for sure, specifically the actual story structure, just because it feels remarkably similar to, well, some of those films in particular, or even some game story structure, like, it's a bit difficult to tell at this point right about now, just because if you couldn't tell already, in this particular level right there, whenever I first got to there on the time attack mode, it did took me about 10 attempts, but that's just mainly because of not only those munchers keeps on getting your way, but it's also about the fact that the AI of Mini Mario behaves a little bit kind of randomly sometimes, I'll admit though right away, especially noticeable. It almost comes to a point about the fact that there might be a couple of times there might be like some rare occasions, there might be some close calls here and there. Specifically, I almost let Mini Mario die from that particular Muncher enemy right there, but that was just generally a close call right there, so that's as far as I can try to explain about that. So anyway, and there's also another one of those levels, if you couldn't tell, which appears to be level 4-6 plus, which as a result, again, whenever I first got to this stage on time attack mode, it honestly did took me about 5 attempts for that particular level whenever I first time experiencing it. That's just mainly because not only you have to rush this, but it's also about it requires you to able to, like, you know what I'm saying, delivering the actual trash can, and then you are obviously trying to able to guide Mini Mario just onto this spot, and then you should be good to go. So as a result, you don't need to, like, well, you have to rush this as well if you want to activate the red switch immediately, because if you're too slow, obviously you waste time. So because of that though, yeah, there's nothing right to home about. So, and fundamentally speaking, though, is about the fact that I think this is not going to be the final time we're going to be seeing those propeller-like flower obstacles right there anytime soon, until specifically yet again until the expert stages basically. So, but I digress. Something's worth noting for as well is that, unfortunately, to tell you the truth, is that I don't think it's possible I can probably get back onto Sonic Dash for a while, because as far as I'm aware, that we're about to be going on to specific reruns of able to actually just trying to get specific character cards, except this time it appears to be based off from super transformations for both, let's just say, Super Shadow, Super Silver, and even with Super Sonic, which technically speaking though, I've already got them, since thankfully with the forms of the event tokens, whilst compared to the character cards, it's pretty ridiculous to able to actually obtain specifically, you know, unlockable characters with that particular ridiculous requirement. So, but still, I just really do not like the forms of the character card system in Sonic Dash up to this point, especially noticeable because, like I said before, not only is it incredibly random, but it's also worth noting for is about the fact that I just cannot even believe it does have some bit of like randomness involved. Like I've already explained about that briefly earlier, so anyways, I think suffice to say, we'll pretty much have to do one more world for right now, which, as I said, there's sensed journey forms within the beginning portion of this entire video so far. We're about to go on to Spooky House Plus, and once we're done with Spooky House Plus, then we'll save up the forms of the final few levels until specifically for tomorrow, just in case it'll be a perfect opportunity to able to finish up everything in Mario vs. Donkey Kong for the Nintendo Switch remake. So, but I will still say it's about the fact I really do enjoy this particular remake. It's not perfect by any means. I mean, sure, it's a great experience. So, but anyways, though, let's just go ahead and, you know, try to discuss upon another thing I want to mention about. As a result, remember what Maxi has already pointed out about the fact of this leaked game going on, which appears to be Sonic Toys Party. And yeah, he did already mention about the fact that the entire gameplay style for Sonic Toys Party, it plays pretty similar to Fall Guys. However, as far as I do realize about something is that the actual font of the actual title of the game, it looks remarkably similar to the Toy Story logo, except with the lack of numbers and stuff like that. So relatively speaking though, I honestly have no idea they come across into that similar logo as the forms of not only Toy Story 1, but also with Toy Story 2, 3, and 4, and even with the upcoming 5th one, which still, I find the 5th one to be unnecessarily ridiculous when it comes to likely for it's announcing the 5th film before it decides to able to release until 2026 of all things. Like, seriously, it's just so ridiculously over the top when it comes to able to announce a bunch of familiar sequels on specific franchise. I mean, then again, we'll save that particular topic in the future in regards to the forms of specifically. Also, I just realized about something is that during at some point in August this year, in 2024, I'm pretty sure that D23, you know, with the forms of the Disney event, I think it's going to be taking place at some point in August this year, which is to be more accurate though, let's just say in the beginning portion of August, I'm pretty sure. So maybe if there's a possibility that we might able to actually hear some more information about the forms of some upcoming Disney projects during that specific time. Although that again, we'll discuss on that and during at some point once that particular event starts until in August. So, but either way. And I suppose that was technically speaking the true final thing I want to mention about, and that's what appears to be something to deal with the fact that, well, there's this game called Age of Wonders 3. I believe that particular game did somehow came out on Windows PC, including Mac PC as well. I believe in during new forms event tomorrow anyway. I believe that game is going to be celebrating its 10th anniversary or something. And as far as I'm aware, until when it gets to the point until on the April 1st, obviously no matter what though, Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate on Windows PC, including PlayStation Network for PlayStation 3 or something, and even with Xbox Live Arcade, including the Wii U eShop or something, that particular versions of that game is expected to be also became a decade old, and during at some point on the 1st of April, so I suppose, yeah, that's what I can really think about it. Also, another thing I just wanted to mention about this as well, Castlevania Lords of Shadow Mirror of Fate HD on Windows PC has already became a decade old. So yeah, happy 10th anniversary of the PC Windows version of, well, Castlevania Lords of Shadows Mirrors of Fate HD. So yeah, kudos to that. And, I suppose, yeah, that's as far as I can talk about. Also, there is technically one more thing I want to mention about, and that's what appears to be about the fact that, yes indeed, I did somehow manage to able to watch, not one, but 2 films recently for my spare own time, thanks to the forms of Sky Cinema, which there are The Flash in the forms of in 2023 film, and you never believe this, yes, I finally managed to able to went to see Barbie, you know, with the live action movie and what have you, and I won't lie to you, Barbie movie is a good movie, which as a result, despite the fact there's a lot more girly-ish about it, but I will admit that right away it does have a lot of adult humor for time to time, as well as the forms of some funny bits for time to time as well. So, relatively speaking, I honestly have to admit it though right away, I really do enjoy the Barbie movie, and I'm sure enough I will able to actually get around onto Openrama at some point, enduring at some point until next month. At least it did say, enduring the forms of the actual film schedules or anything else like that. So, I mean, then again, I do apologize for my commentary gets a little bit slightly iffy sometimes, because let's face it though, that I think I've already explained about quite a lot of stuff for this point today, because obviously, well, there's a lot of stuff I would like to mention about, which is kind of a cool thing to able to discuss on that point. So anyways, let's move on to the last level for now, and that's what appears to be Donkey Kong boss fight in Spooky House Plus. So yeah, nothing else to say about this, I guess, although you're still able to actually have 6 hit points, assuming of course if you're about to participating in time attack mode. So yeah, that's as far as I can try to able to explain about the forms of the Plus Wells department in the you know, time attack mode in general. So I guess with that being said for this point, folks, is that once we do manage to beat Donkey Kong on this stage, I can suffice to say we can pretty much end things off at this point right here. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Mario vs. Donkey Kong as the Switch remake. And that's what appears to be about the fact that we're about to wrap things up, everything in time attack mode. And as a result, we're going on to World 6 Plus, which is Slippery Summons, all the way up to the rest of the expert stages. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Later, fellas.